Okay, so Monos, which is the new film by Alejandro Landis, which is a really extraordinary piece of work.
There you
It
go.
is
Album
album of
of
the
the week,
week.
definitely.
So it's a film nominally about teenage guerrillas, teenage soldiers being trained in an unspecified mountain above the cloud line as part of an ongoing war, which is never given geographical or geopolitical explanation of exactly where it is or exactly what's happening. They have cartoony nom de guerre war names: Rambo, Wolf, Boom Boom. They're being trained by a scary messenger figure who says to them at the beginning that their main job is that they're looking after what appears to be an American prisoner of war who seems to be being held to ransom. And they're told at the beginning that they have been given a gift of a milk cow that they must milk. If they don't milk the cow will explode. And so there's this sort of strange, almost fairy tale tenor to it at the beginning. The messenger then leaves, and they are then left to their own devices. And they have to report back to whoever the authorities are through radio transmissions, but they are essentially alone. They are isolated. And then during the course of the movie, they have to leave that area. They have to move down into the jungle. The group starts to fracture. And there is a very, very specific reference to Lord of the Flies in the appearance of a pig's head on a stick, literally a pig's head on a stick, which, of course, as you'll know, is the kind of central image from Lord of the Flies, which is...
I do remember from the book. Yes.
No, exactly. And in fact, the phrase is pig's head on a stick. So on the one hand, it's a film about teenage soldiers, of which we have seen other films like, for example, Johnny Mad Dog. Johnny Mad Dog, actually, I think is a really, really underrated movie. It's extraordinary, kind of hallucinogenic, terrifying but very, very moving portrait of child soldiery. And this film is about that, but it's also not about that. It is about the central characters that we meet, and the group dynamic is created brilliantly using both actors who are seasoned, accomplished actors. One of the characters is played by Moshe Arias, who had a central role. He was in the Hannah Montana TV series. He had a central role in Last Kings of Summer. Other members of the cast are complete neophytes, people arriving on the screen for the first time, who were discovered by this extensive casting process. And I have to say, it's a great credit to the film that watching it, you don't have any sense that those are the trained actors and those aren't. They all seem to be a group that you completely believe that they have been living this isolated existence on the top of this mountain under this strange ongoing war situation. You believe that completely. What happens is that the group, which has a kind of feral quality in terms of its own internal hierarchical dynamic, starts to fracture. Things start to fall apart. And obviously, as we said before, Lord of the Flies, there's also certain references to Conrad's Heart of Darkness, which appears to just run through so much cinema at the moment. I mean, Ad Astra is absolutely, a Heart of Darkness story that happens to be taking place in space. I also bizarrely saw things that made me think. I mean, I don't think these are reference points that the director used. The director and the writer said that when they were making the film, they watched Come and See, the traumatizing, child's eye view of war, the Klimov film. But at one point, I was thinking of Barbet Schroeder's La Vallée, The Valley Obscured by Clouds, which is this very strange movie about a mythical place that is meant to be paradisial, but this is very dark undertones to it. Occasionally, it seemed like that crossed with the threat element of Ruggero Deodata's Cannibal Holocaust almost. The way in which it's filmed is with these deeply oversaturated colours that place you right experientially in the middle of this landscape, in the middle of this group, in the middle of this environment. And the film has an almost, at one point, an actually hallucinogenic tone to it, because what happens is that as we become involved in the group dynamics, we start to share the experiences of each one of the characters. And then underneath it all is a score by Mika Levy, which is one of the most brilliantly strange things I have heard in years. I had been listening to the score for a long time before I saw the film. I only saw the film this week, but I've been listening to the score for several weeks. It came out on a CD a few weeks ago. And it's got this strange combination. At the top end of it, there are these whistles and beeps, which on the one hand echo the bird calls that the teenagers make to each other. On the other hand, captures the sort of shrill whistle of authority, but also seem to me to evoke like a radio signal or a sonar, something completely lost, beeping, lost in the universe. And then underneath that, there's this timpani and these really sort of deep, thunderous, like they're on a volcano that's about to explode, or like there's an earthquake that's rumbling underneath them. And what the genius of it is that the film becomes this completely hallucinogenic, head-spinning, immersive experience. So whereas on the one hand it is dealing with the horror of the idea of child soldiers, it's also dealing with the dynamic between this group. It's dealing with adolescence. It's very, very fluid in terms of its depiction of borders and of gender borders and of age borders and of geographical borders. It's a film in which elements seem to flow almost randomly into each other, so much so that I remember once when I was reviewing There Will Be Blood, I said it's almost like the film is rewriting the language of narrative film as you're watching it. Because I remember the first half an hour of There Will Be Blood, in which there's almost no dialogue. It's all that strange Johnny Greenwood soundtrack. And I felt a tonal similarity with that, watching this film, thinking, I was halfway through it, thinking, I don't quite know what this is. But what I do know is that it's doing what it's doing quite brilliantly. And it's the combination of, I mean, obviously, cinema is an audio-visual medium. It's the synchronicity of those two things tied together. This has a fantastic ensemble cast. It has a setting which is on the one hand rooted in an awful reality, but also has an almost fabulous fairy tale quality to it. It's really visually striking, and the soundtrack is just, as I said, it's like something that's, I mean, Mica Levi obviously did Under the Skin, and he's got an Oscar nomination for Jackie. The soundtrack is quite the strangest and quite the most brilliant thing that I've heard in a long time, and it put me in mind to some extent of the pulsing nature of Anna Meredith's music from 8th grade. And this is a really foolish thing to say as a film critic, but it's a film that has to be seen to be believed,
as opposed to
as a film that I could adequately explain to you in words, because it is so much to do with the audio visual experience. I mean, I've tried, I've given it my best shot.
It was a good shot.
Thank you, but it's probably failed.
And the movie is called
Monos.